Good day. My name is Jan Richards, and I am a volunteer with Rise's Book Club, and we really want to welcome you for our event today. I'm a chapter member in Venice, Florida, and I will be your moderator today, along with Gail Bouchard. She is also another member of the Book Club Committee. We're pleased to have all of you here with us today. It's going to be a fascinating conversation with our guest speaker, Eliza Reid, the author of our featured book and the First Lady of Iceland. Before we get started, let's do a few housekeeping things for the Zoom. If we would ask that all of you stay muted during the entire presentation. Those of you that were on a little early have already gotten those instructions. And also, if you wouldn't mind letting us know where you're from. As I said, I'm from Southwest Florida, but we enjoy knowing where the rest of us are from. So if you'd like to enter the chat, let us know where you're viewing our event from. That would be great. Also, it might be convenient for you to change your view, and I'm going to do mine right now. On my computer, it's up on the top right. There's a view that looks like a bunch of little dots. And if you change that view to speaker, then you will only see the person that is speaking. And again, we'll remind you to keep yourself on mute so that you don't cause any background noise while our speaker is speaking. We'd like to take a moment now to welcome all of our members, as well as guests and folks who might be new to Together Women Rise. We're a powerful community of women and allies that has been dedicated to achieving global gender equality for the past 20 years. We have hundreds of local chapters across the U.S. where our members join together and learn about gender equality issues. They give grants to organizations that empower women and girls in low-income countries and build community to forge meaningful connections with each other and with women and girls around the world. Our book club is just another way for us to engage with this mission and to learn about global gender equality issues and to experience community with others who care about making the world a better place for women and girls. For more information about our book club or how to get involved with Together Women Rise, you can visit our website at togetherwomenrise.org. Today, we're going to be discussing the book Secrets of the Sprakkar, Iceland's Extraordinary Women and How They're Changing the World. The author, Eliza Reid, is a journalist, editor, and co-founder of the annual Iceland Winters Retreat. She grew up in the countryside near Ottawa, Canada, and moved to Iceland in 2003, 5 years after winning a student raffle for a date with a man who became her husband, Gudni Johansson. When he took office as president of Iceland on August 1st in 2016, Eliza became the country's first lady. In that capacity, she's been active in promoting gender equality, entrepreneurship and innovation, tourism and sustainability, and the country's writers and rich literary heritage. Being the spouse of the head of state is an immense privilege, full of surreal and wonderful experiences. And Eliza's been very candid about this role, which is an unofficial position with no real job description. Penning a lauded op-ed in the New York Times and delivering a TEDx talk on the topic. Her first book was an instant bestseller in Iceland and Canada, and the New York Times editor's pick, and it was recommended by Hillary Rodham Clinton and Margaret Atwood, among others. We're really fortunate to have Eliza join us today from Iceland. And I'm going to turn this over to Wendy Fradlin, Rise's Communications and Membership Director, for our special conversation today. We've allotted more time for this conversation than we normally do. And then Eliza has graciously agreed to answer some of your questions. So if you have questions, or comments, please put them in the chat. We also usually end our book club events with small breakout groups. And we will have those groups today, but we encourage and recognize that some of you may need to jump off. And if you need to do that because it's your lunch hour or other time constraints, just do so. But if you can stay, if you're able, we hope that you will. For these small group discussions are lots of opportunity to build community, and we'll have a good book giveaway at the end. So you've heard enough from me. I'm going to turn it over to Wendy and Eliza now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jan. This is truly one of the perks of my job is I get to participate in these events and actually get to interview our author today. So Eliza, welcome. We're thrilled to have you here. It's nice to see you again. I met you very briefly at an event here in Greenville, South Carolina at M. Judson Booksellers, and enjoyed listening to you then, and you graciously agreed to participate with us today. So we're going to jump in and have a bit of a conversation, and please do share any questions that you might have for Eliza in the chat. So I'm going to start off with something that you, Eliza, wrote in the acknowledgments at the back of the book. You state, "It is said in Iceland that everyone walks with a book in their belly, that we all have stories to share, experiences, wisdom, and adventure that we are waiting to birth." I really love that. We walk with a book in our belly. Can you tell us a little bit about the spark that you had for writing this book and what you were hoping to achieve with the book?
Sure. And first of all, thanks, Wendy. It's nice to see you again, this time virtually. And thank you to Jan for the lovely introduction. It's really nice for me to be here on a beautiful fall afternoon from Iceland. So some of you can see I'm in my home office. This is my kind of casual location, and the sun is starting to set here in Iceland. So maybe as the time goes on, it'll kind of get darker and darker and darker as we're here, but we'll see how it goes. And I'm not really following the chat right now, but I did see that someone asked for a cover of the book. So I'm just going to hold that up here to give my little plug for the book, if you want to see what it looks like. And then to answer your question, you talked about the spark for the book. And, you know, it really started with that idea of the book in one's belly, this phrase that we have in Iceland. And that is, I come from a sort of journalism writer's background. I've run an annual writing retreat in Iceland for the last 10 years. I used to edit Icelanders in Flight magazine and worked a lot with writers. And in that capacity, people ask me all the time, what's the book in your belly? In Iceland, we love to tell stories, and a lot of people are writers. And people used to ask me all the time. And I said, well, I don't have one. You know, I'm the first lady. I run a writer's retreat. I do all these speeches. I have 4 kids and a stepdaughter, and, you know, there's lots going on. And then in 2020, when the world shut down at the beginning of the pandemic, everything kind of changed because, of course, as a first lady, there's a little bit less to do when there's a global pandemic. You're not opening conferences and doing speeches. You're doing a lot of events online. And our children we actually still had school in Iceland, but at sort of staggered times of day. So I would just sort of walk them individually to and from school. And that's really when you have your best ideas. And Iceland had the world's first democratically elected female head of state, Vigdís Finnbogadóttir, in 1980. And she turned 90 years old in April 2020. And it was all over the news in Iceland. You know, of course, it was meant to be a big celebration that had to be canceled, but it was a huge deal. And I remember thinking on one of these walks, we are so proud of Vigdís and her achievements and how she broke one of the thickest glass ceilings. And yet, although that made the international news in 1980 for a day or so, it's not something that people outside of maybe the Nordic region really know. And that was really the spark of me thinking, not to tell Vigdís' story necessarily, but me thinking of all the wondrous and interesting things about this country that people outside don't know. And the subject for me of gender equality has always been important. And the fact that I see Iceland kind of from an outsider's eyes, because I moved here when I was in my 20s. And so that was really the spark, was to write almost a love letter to my adopted homeland, a warts and all love letter. I hope it's not, marketing brochure, but a kind of realistic portrayal of the country, using the theme of gender equality and exploring what it is like to be a woman in, quote unquote, the world's best country for women. And so the book itself, for those of you who've read it or seen it, know that it's really a combination of interviews with about 40 different women from all walks of life, I hope. And I really tried to pick women that we could all relate, that were, told a unique story, but were also relatable in some way, that we could connect to in some way, and explored just the good and the bad and the ugly of being a woman in Iceland. And the thread throughout it really is my own experience as an immigrant to the country, who never expected to become married to the president, and sort of my journey there of how I'm trying to use that opportunity to raise people's voices. So that was kind of it. And then it was a whole adventure writing a book, which I'd never done before, and writing a book during a pandemic.
Yes, I'm sure that was a whole huge experience for you. And you and I share a common bond, where I've told you I'm from Canada as well, and neither one of us are living in our home countries. And certainly you talked just now about how this book became a love letter to Iceland. This is your time to pitch Iceland. Tell us, what do you love about this country, and why was it so easy for you, or maybe it wasn't easy, but seems like it was easy for you to embrace this country as your own?
Well, to answer the second part of your question, I suppose a lot of that has to do with my own attitude, or what I tried, because my husband and I, we met in the UK in graduate school, and he has a daughter from his first marriage. And when he was finishing his PhD, there was no question that he was going to go back to Iceland, of course, because he wanted to be close to his daughter while she was growing up. And so when we decided, right, we are going to build our lives together, that was going to be in Iceland. There wasn't a debate about what country that was going to be in. And so when I moved to the country, I moved with the attitude of, I'm here for the long term. And, not to say that you wouldn't try living elsewhere at some point, but to say at least, while she was growing up. And having the, I can't quit when it gets dark in the winter attitude, I think really helped me, because, there's always differences and always things to adjust to, and always changes. And if you think, well, now this has happened, I'm going to leave, there'd be many, many opportunities. And so I just went into it with the approach of, I'm going to be here, and I'm going to enjoy it. And as I do enjoy it here, of course. And I think another plus side that was important to me as well was that although I moved to Iceland because of my Icelandic partner, I wanted to also stay here for me. So I didn't, I wanted to create my own reason for being in the country, which meant having my own career, my own social circles, my own interests and hobbies here, aside from what my husband was doing, so that I felt like I had a really well-rounded life here. And so that was helpful to me when I first moved. I got a job, I had friends, I started learning Icelandic, and all of that I think helped. As to what I like about the country, I mean, I like a lot the social structures, and that relates as well to gender equality, at least to the aspiration of working towards greater equality. And also this idea that, of course, obviously we're not there yet. No country is there yet, but even though we're closer than other countries, we still aren't satisfied with that. And I think that's just one small example of some of the positive things. The weather isn't always great, straight up, but today, for example, it's absolutely beautiful. I'm looking out. If I turn out here to look at my window, I can see the sea and the mountains. Most of the day, when the tide is low, there's a rock and a seal has been sitting out on it, sun tanning. And, so it can also be very, very beautiful. But I think I like that sort of progressive mentality that we see here in the country.
Yes, and certainly you had a little bit of an experience to the weather from Canada, but I mean, I'm sure it's still
it's
quite
much
different.
colder in Canada than winters. We don't get that cold.
Much
It's a
colder.
misnomer that we're called Iceland because, and I'm going to put my tourism visitor hat on for you, but our average January temperatures are warmer than those of New York. So we're not as cold as you may think.
Well, there you go. And, Iceland is becoming more and more of a popular destination for tourists. And your description of the country in the book and today, I think certainly makes me want to go there more than ever. But let's get into the book a little bit. And, the title of the book is Secrets of the Sprakkar. Did I get that?
Yeah, 100%. Excellent.
Now, you wisely put the definition and the pronunciation at the front of the book. So Sprakkar is an ancient Icelandic word meaning extraordinary or outstanding women.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk a little more about what does this term really mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
And how did you go about selecting the Sprakkar that you interviewed for the book?
So the term, I wanted to have an Icelandic word, if possible, in the title of the book. I just thought it might make it intriguing. And a friend of mine found this word, which is actually a really old and obscure Icelandic word. So not a word that was in common use. So even my husband had never heard of this word before, and his mother, who's an Icelandic teacher. So I actually called this language institute to make sure that it was a legitimate word and could be used. And it was. And as you said, it's a masculine noun, actually, that describes exclusively women. And I just love the concept. I love the fact that even though it had fallen out of use, the Icelandic language has a word that describes exclusively women in an exclusively positive way. And so I definitely wanted to use that. And what I really wanted to do in that sense, too, was highlight the extraordinary in the ordinary. We all have something extraordinary about us. We all have something unique and special about us. And so the different women that I profiled, of course, I wanted a variety of backgrounds and opinions and perspectives. And I also wanted to kind of inspire us all to know that we all have that potential to be outstanding and to be extraordinary. And some of us, for external circumstances, it's more difficult to have our voices heard. And some of us, for internal circumstances, have difficulty finding the confidence to use our voices. And so I thought, telling some of these different stories might provide all those different kinds of perspectives. And because there's a sort of a strong memoir angle throughout the book as well, in some senses, I tried to connect people to me in a sense. So many of the people I already knew, some of them I knew of them, but I hadn't met them. And then other times I was referred to them by other people. So it kind of came about through, a whole lot of different ways and reasons. Usually if I knew the person personally, I mentioned that in the text when I was introducing someone, how I knew them.
You absolutely had a wonderful, eclectic and fascinating and diverse group of women that you got to talk with. I'm sure that was just a pure enjoyment in that process of writing the book, is just talking with these fascinating women.
Oh, absolutely. And also, under pandemic regulations, which was kind of interesting here because, being the first lady, I obviously followed pandemic rules, 200%. Or, if you were allowed 10 people, I wouldn't have more than 5 people, et cetera, et cetera. So I was very cautious about that, and they kept changing the rules. And sometimes you could go swimming in the sea, like I did with some people, and then other times you couldn't leave the city. So I would do a Zoom interview. So that was interesting, but yeah, it was just really fun. And I tried to create a bit of a sense of place as well. So when I went to visit, I went to different parts of the country and spoke to people. I tried as much as possible to go to people's homes and to talk to them there, rather than have them come to me. And it was really great fun. And I was so touched as well that everybody who had asked if they would be willing to be interviewed for the book, they all said yes. And the first several interviews I did sort of under shrouds of secrecy because I hadn't announced that I would be writing a book, and I wondered how that might be received in the press here, and it was generally very positive. But I would say to people, I'm doing this interview. First, I didn't know if it was going to be a book. I would say, I don't know if anyone's going to buy it. And then when I knew that, and it was still not public, and I would say, please don't tell anybody you're doing this yet, et cetera, et cetera. And despite the fact that I did numerous interviews, including those ones with the big groups of women, the friendship chapters, nobody had found out beforehand. So I thought that was really interesting as well. Women are very good at keeping secrets when you ask them to.
Yes, clearly they are. And, Together Women Rise focuses on gender equality. So this was certainly a book that interested us and related to us. but it's kind of a different selection as well, because our work, the programs that we fund are typically in low-income countries and marginalized countries in the global south. So now we're doing a book club event about Iceland, and the countries we focus on, it's really difficult to be a woman or a girl. And here is Iceland, where, as you've mentioned, by many measures, including the World Economic Forum, Iceland is like the planet's best place to be a woman. Can you share a little bit about why you think Iceland has consistently taken home that top ranking in terms of gender equality? And what is it that makes it a better place to be a woman?
Well, the World Economic Forum, has various guidelines that it uses for indices, and some of the ways that are there: access to healthcare, access to education, which are quite even in Iceland, and representation in public bodies. So we have 47.5% women members of parliament, for example. Those are sort of the three areas where we're quite strong. Numerous other countries, of course, are also strong. One of the areas that it gauges where we are less strong has to do with representation in the private sector and in the boardroom. So even though, for example, we have laws proving equal pay for equal work, we still have a wage gap. Even though we have quotas for the boards of publicly traded companies, we don't see as much equality in the C-suite with people running companies and senior management of companies and organizations. So that's an area where we have to improve. And obviously, a huge area just in general that we need to examine is the idea of intimate partner violence and gender-based violence, which also exists in Iceland. I should have memorized this statistic because a new report has just been issued, but I didn't, talking about the number of reports that were made to police just in the first 6 months of this year. There's been a new report issued. The number of those cases that actually get investigated by the police versus then actually someone gets charged and goes to trial, as you can imagine, is very, very small. And so that's a huge area that we need to continue to work on in Iceland. So where I think all of us here in the country are very quick to say that although we score highest on these indices, it does not mean that we have achieved gender equality.
Yes, that's true. There is absolutely no country that has achieved that full gender equality, but you guys have certainly made significant progress. But it was interesting to us, despite all of these great things that are going on for women, the women that you interviewed, they were very humble and said, we still got a ways to go here, even, despite this. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what happened last week in Iceland. For those of you who don't know, Icelandic women went on strike. And this isn't the first time this has happened in your country. And it's part of a Women's Day Off. Women who are working in the paid workforce, women who are unpaid, just stopped working that day. So tell us a little bit about the history of that. I think the first time this was done was 1975. What was it like on that day, or what has it typically been like on the day that the women go on strike? And has this been effective?
Yeah. So in 1975, you're right, this is the first day of what we call the Women's Day Off then. And that was when various feminist movements and other activist movements in Iceland wanted to draw attention to the invaluable role of women in all aspects of society. And they decided really to have a strike. But then there was a bit of protest that the word strike was a very kind of aggressive kind of workers' union tone that some people didn't feel comfortable going on strike. And I think this is a key message actually from that event in 1975. People said, well, let's work for compromise. We all ultimately want the same thing. Let's just call it a day off instead. So they did that. And 90% of the country's women took part, which meant that day they didn't do both paid and unpaid work. So not only did they not show up to teach in the schools or to run the daycares or to be bank tellers or flight attendants, they also didn't cook supper or look after the children who couldn't go to school because all the schools were closed because the teachers weren't working, et cetera, et cetera. And predictably, the country shut down. And there's all kinds of stories, about radio broadcasters with kids in the background because they brought their kids to work, and it really galvanized the country to know that when you work together, change can be possible. And I think that you know, it wasn't like the next morning everybody woke up and said, this is it. That was a moment. But gradually over the years, you realized what a significant moment it was. And it was only 5 years later we elected a president. Then there was a women's list in Parliament, started increasing the number of women parliamentarians, and things started to move a little faster after that. And then, as you mentioned, every now and then, or 6 other times, 5 other times plus 75, there would be other women's strikes that would start at the same time of day when women had earned up to what men were earning. So it would start at 2:05 one day, and then 5 years later it would start at 2:19 or something like that. But last week, the same day, October 24th, as the initial strike was the first ever all-day strike that had taken place since 1975. And this was significant because, one, it was called a strike. It was called what it was called, and it was done not only to highlight the ongoing wage gap, but also other inequalities within society, which especially targeting the eradication of gender-based violence. And it was a strike for all women and non-binary individuals, because people were realizing that the challenges as well for non-binary people are similar in that sense to some of the ones that women face. So that was it was very important to use this inclusive language as well. We were really lucky with the weather, and you know, that always helps. And once again, I was posting it on my social media, they estimate that 80 to 100,000 people came to the events that afternoon in Reykjavik, and that's out of a population in the entire country of only 370,000. So that's a huge number. And then there were smaller events elsewhere around the country. To my tremendous shame or not, I was sadly out of the country last week and missed being there in person. But I did strike all that day, and I put an out of office on my email that I wasn't going to answer emails. I didn't have any meetings or phone calls. So I did really have an actual day off, and I definitely couldn't see any of what we call the mental load at home, because I wasn't in the country. So all of those music lessons and sports practices, and obviously school was canceled. But anything to do with cooking for the kids or anything to do with that sort of home stuff was all managed by my husband, who, I will hasten to add, is quite good anyway at doing his share of all that in any case. So he wasn't any the worse for wear for being in charge that one day either.
Other men in the country responded to this Women's Day off?
I mean, it was just incredible, and everybody's been talking about it all the time. Just this sort of this friendly spirit that was in the air, and I hope that that's a moment that people really capture. And I think that that's something that helps to galvanize things. It wasn't. I think overall, it's this positive approach, this positive idea, this idea that we're working towards greater equality because it's going to benefit everybody in society. We're not there to take something away from men. And it wasn't, you know, the video you share, it's people singing. It's not people yelling and screaming. And I think that, combined with the fact that it's not a kind of political thing. I mean, our prime minister is a woman. She went on strike that day. She didn't deliver a speech at the event. There weren't politicians on stage there doing their talks. It's up to the politicians to change the laws if they wish to afterwards. But this event was led by a number of feminist, grassroots, international organizations, not something for one person to try to score political points from. There wasn't, you know, kind of one leader that everyone is galvanizing around. It's really something for everybody. And I think that reminds us as well how we all have a role to play in this.
I mean, I think that's incredible that you can say it's not a political event, because too often, even here in this country, gender equality is perceived as a political event, political issue. And, you know, why are you talking about that? Equality, it's a political issue. And really, it's much more of a human rights issue, isn't it? I hesitate to ask this, but I have to ask this because it's a obvious question, but I know it's a little awkward as well. What would you say, feel comfortable saying, that the US, where most of our members are located, could learn from Iceland's example?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I was thinking about this a lot because, you know, when we met in person in March in South Carolina, that event was part of a book tour, a little book tour that I did mostly in the southern states, to coincide with the paperback launch of Secrets of the Sprakkar. And, I would say that my events kind of preach to the choir a little bit. I think that they're probably 80 or 90% women, people who are interested in this topic or interested in Iceland. And so many people come up to me afterwards with kind of hope in their eyes or points saying, what do you think about what's going on here? And can you believe it? And what can we do? And if there's one takeaway that I have from all of that, it is, to me, gives me so much hope for the number of people who are so passionate about change and who are so interested in change. Right before that event in Greenville, I was in Columbia. It was a packed house. I was with a recently retired judge, a state level judge, and a state representative. And there's so much activism in the room and so much interest in this and belief in it that that kind of fills me with hope as well, that there's people are really driven to make change. And if there's any kind of message that I have in my book, and as you say, I am very cognizant of my role and all of that, and I don't think that it's my place to tell other countries what they should be doing. But what I do hope that the book does is that it inspires us on an individual level to know that we are all role models and that we can all make a difference. Because I think when it comes to gender equality, broadly speaking, it's a little bit like the climate emergency. I think, well, I'll offset my flights and I recycle, but the planet is still cooking. And it's really hard to feel like our efforts are more than just a drop in the bucket. And sometimes it's like that with gender equality, where I think, well, I'm going to vote for someone who shares my beliefs, but they are going to implement the laws and not me. And of course, if you have laws that are trying to enshrine further equality or level the playing field, that helps. But if you don't, I think that there's still a lot that we can be doing on an individual basis. And that, there's some examples that I have in the book that include, using our voices and speaking up and trying to share the proverbial mic with other people and consuming arts and media and culture with a kind of diversity, equality lens on. And I think that these books, hopefully, in these kind of environments, they galvanize us and they encourage us to know that it's important. And we are all, we might not all change the world on a massive scale, but we can all do our part to nudge things in the right direction.
Well, I'm not sure you could have done a better setup for the commonality that, between, you and some of the things you wrote in the book and Together Women Rise. You already mentioned when we work together, change can be possible. You talk in the book and you give examples of how women coming together in community, whether these women's associations that are coming together to connect with each other and also to do some service in the world. And that, yes, it's hard sometimes to see how you can play a role in creating that change. But we feel strongly that through Together Women Rise, with each of us contributing our part, but then adding it all up, that collective, that impact, that together, we really do accomplish a lot. Can you comment a little bit more on why you think it's so powerful, women in particular, coming together and the benefits of that?
I mean, it absolutely is. You're right. And when I was giving you that answer, I confess, I didn't even think about Together Women Rise, but it is exactly it is exactly that mentality. And I don't know, I hesitate to generalize too much on, genders or not, or what we're saying, but, I feel like women are kind of used to multitasking and getting things done in many senses. And, as you mentioned too, there's a whole chapter in my book on the power of female friendships. And that was really important to me, that kind of beyond the family unit, but outside the context of a workplace or a place of worship or education, what is it that inspires us and holds us together? And so that's why I wrote that chapter. And I tried to have two quite different examples. One, this group of women who were very, privileged in background, that they undertake these tremendous physical challenges to really kind of push their own limits and serve as role models for others for a good end. You know, again, knowing that a lot of us would love, you know, a lot of people, they would love to do that, but they have 3 jobs and they're taking public transportation and they don't, you know, they're not able to carve that time out for themselves. And I think that's important to acknowledge, first of all, and then also important to work on how we again can level a playing field to allow that for more people. And then secondarily, this group, one of my favorite groups to speak to is this group of elderly women, mostly of these sort of volunteer women's associations, which have been especially strong in Iceland, the countryside, which, you know, for you growing up in Canada, it reminds me of like the United Church Women or these church clubs. But these don't have a religious theme, but, you know, just women getting together to better their communities and really doing it without any expectation for credit or attention, but fundraising so much money, you know, knitting so many little beanies for newborn babies and baking pies and catering wakes after funerals and just the support that those women provide to each other, especially in the countryside, especially in a time when there was a lot more isolation there, just kind of looking out for each other and how important that was. And I think that was also important to me when I said, you know, for example, and I said to them, actually, I might be wrong. I don't know that I did ask them that, but many people I would say, well, and would you consider yourself a feminist? And a lot of people said, no, I think I really think we do equality and all of this. And to me, I'm someone who's always considered myself a feminist. And that's sort of my own, I consider I have quite a sort of positive or sort of non-aggressive definition of feminism. But it was important for me to include the voices of those people who think, well, I shouldn't call myself a feminist because we're all equal. We're all human beings. And, you know, without going into definition of why they would or they wouldn't, but they might have quite different perspectives from me in a lot of ways. And I think that was very important as well to talk about. And they were just, all of them were so lovely. And even when the book came out in Icelandic, they all came to the book launch and it was really nice to see them all.
You're just making me want to go to Iceland more and more. And I think Together Women Rise would fit in quite nicely there. What's next for you? What future projects?
Oh, you froze for 1 second, but I hope, is it me or is it you, Wendy? And wait for, oh, you froze for a second there, Wendy. Can you finish your question?
I was just saying, you know, what are your next projects? What's next? What do you hope to accomplish in the future?
Well, I'm still doing all my First Lady stuff. I'm going to London next week to speak on a travel conference. I'm running my event, the Iceland Writers Retreat, every April. So we're still working hard on that. We're just deciding some scholarship winners at the moment. I can also tell you, I haven't really publicly announced it yet, but it's semi-public that I've written another book.
Tell us. We'll be the first.
So you can I don't even think you can pre-order it yet. Well, it's a bit different. It's a murder mystery. And it's a murder mystery set in Iceland with a strong female protagonist in the sort of cozy, classic murder mystery style. And it's a book deal, so I get to write a couple at least. It's a series, so we'll see what happens. But I wanted to continue to see if there were more books in my belly, I suppose. So if people follow me on social media or something, I'll announce it more soon, and then they can read and see if I'm any good at writing fiction.
Well, thanks for giving us that little tip for the future.
Yeah.
You can see people already saying they're going to pick up your new book. So I would love to keep talking to you for a long, long time. We do need to wrap this portion up. But before we do, I've asked Eliza if she would do a little reading from her book for us. And we kind of talked a little bit about which one would be best. And I said, well, anyone. So I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll get ready for a few audience questions.
So Wendy, yeah, you initially suggested I read the very end of the book, which I'm going to confess I haven't done before because I want people to read the book. But then I was rereading it, and it does kind of wrap everything up a lot. And it isn't a murder mystery, so it's not like I'm telling you who the murderer is by reading the last page. So I think I will read the very end on the condition to all of you that I hope that it doesn't impede you from reading the book. It kind of summarizes some of the messages, and I hope an inspiring feeling, at least. The people of Iceland are changing the world by bringing gender equality within reach. But the secrets to doing so, and even to trying to achieve it one day, are in the open domain. To translate an Icelandic idiom verbatim, they lie in the eyes upstairs. Liggur í augum uppi in Icelandic. They are actually obvious, in plain sight for us all to see if we take the time to look, to understand their significance and how we can use them to press forward, step by step. In macro form, for entire communities, the secrets lie in letting go of the unrealistic having it all balancing act, and in doing what we can with what we have. Nursing babies at the pulpit if required. These are references to earlier points in the stories, by the way, or taping over nipples when it's time to wean our child cold turkey. Another reference to an earlier interview. It means nourishing our arts, our culture, and our athletics, not by comparing women to men, but by letting everyone's unique voices be heard. It's moving with the times, helping trans girls and women live the lives they know are right for them, and recognizing the unique challenges immigrants face and the valuable contributions they make. It's understanding on both a national legal level and a personal moral one that sexual and gender-based violence are never acceptable under any circumstances, and that women who are victims of such assault are not to blame. It's hiring people like Morels Guðbjörg, she's in the book, and funding entrepreneurs like Geosedicas Fida, and giving them access to the same funds, while also compensating our lowest paid workers, most of whom are women, fairly for their work. It's leaving no one behind, women, men, or non-binary people, native-born or immigrant, with or without disabilities, on our journey to parity, so that all will benefit. For those of us who don't determine policy, we bring gender equality within reach by using our voices and making ourselves heard. Like Dora, the fish whisperer, and Heida, the farmer and sheep shearer, we follow our dreams, wherever they might take us. We volunteer with women's associations to help share skills, support, companionship, and altruism, all of which help sustain us when life hurls its worst. We speak out and let ourselves be seen and heard on television, on radio, in print, and on social media, amplifying one another's voices and not belittling them. We dare to step into the fray, to run for office at any level, to be role models. It takes concerted, systematic, never-ending, exhausting, thankless effort. For just as easily as we move forward, a bolt from the blue, an unanticipated foe could knock us back. Just as 2020 saw years of global progress in this field abate in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. We must always remain vigilant, on alert. I acknowledge that it is a privilege to be able to channel energies to fighting for equality when so many don't have the money, the access, the voice, or simply the energy, even if they wish to. Those of us who are fortunate enough not to pay such a high price for using our voices, demanding our space and filling it, owe it to the others, and we need to make room for their voices too. We all know Sprakkar. They are in our families, our communities, our places of worship, our governments, our cultural institutions, and our schools. They don't need Iceland's unpredictable nature or saga heroes from the sagas or edgy rap music to shine. They only need us and themselves to elevate them, showcase them, teach others to be like them. If we help turn on their mics and let their voices be heard, we can elect more of them to public office to help us forget about the impossible ledger of the balancing act, control society's pocketbook, permeate traditionally male domains, and advocate for further change. Sprakkar may be an Icelandic word, but it is not the exclusive domain of Nordic privileged feminism. There are extraordinary women everywhere across our beautiful planet. That's the secret. Equality is my right, it's yours too. Thank you.
Wow, I'm really glad you read that one.
And the last line is also, I won't tell you, but the last line, if equality is my right, is a reference to an earlier story as well. So.
Well, that was extremely inspiring. I'm going to see Suzanne, my colleague, if she has a couple of questions from the chat.
Hey, yes, we do. So the first question is, how difficult was it to learn the Icelandic language?
Well, it's one of my favorite questions sometimes that I get, because it's always asked in the past tense, like I sort of woke up and was like, well, I'm finished learning Icelandic now. And I'll tell you that I've been living here for 20 years and I still am not perfect at it. So it's kind of it goes in fits and starts. I took a lot of lessons the first few years. And then for me, at least, the best way was just to practice and just to admit that I make a lot of mistakes, and that's okay. But I'm for several years now, I've been quite comfortable kind of in all circumstances to speak in Icelandic, but you have to be really, you have to be willing to be very embarrassed a lot and pick different things up.
Thanks. Can you talk a little bit more about the writers' workshop that you co-founded?
Sure. Yeah. So 10 years ago, I started an event with a friend of mine called the Iceland Writers Retreat. And that was just because we like to organize events and wanted to plan something fun, but it's lasted really well. And it's basically comprised of two things. It's a series of writing workshops, small groups. So they have maximum 15 people in each. We bring over well-known writers from around the world. Some of the Americans we've had to teach include Barbara Kingsolver, Adam Gopnik, Susan Orlean. This April, we have Jeanette Walls coming, who wrote The Glass Castle. Katie Kitamura wrote Intimacies, Phil Clay. Anyway, lots of fun authors. And they teach all these little small classes on writing. And then we also have tours and events to introduce people to Iceland's literary heritage, because Reykjavik, our capital city, is a UNESCO city of literature. And we have, all this great writing heritage. And so you can come to this beautiful city that loves and respects writers, and you go on a tour. And instead of it being a tour like you would get if you just visited, it's led by a writer. And we have an extra stop at the home of a Nobel Prize winning author. And we have a pub night with readings and music. So there's a lot of Icelandic components. I guess the two things I should add are that it's for everybody. So it's not the kind of event where you have to audition or have your manuscript approved. It's just for anybody who likes to write, whether that means you're a full-time writer or you just, have a diary and want to tinker and find it interesting. Because there's a lot of people out there who love writers and the writing world, and they love reading, but they're not writing, we also created another event called the Iceland Readers Retreat, which runs at the same time. And a lot of that feels, a lot of that runs concurrently, but instead of going to the writing workshops, we have one author this year. It's going to be Meg Wolitzer, who is a big feminist writer, you'll know. She is leading sort of a class on her writing history. And then we have a panel of Icelandic authors and all that kind of thing. So it's called the Iceland Writers Retreat. And you can go on our website if you want to find out more. Although I should quickly say, before this call, I was with that hat on tech calls because our newsletter sign up widget is not working. So if you go to our website and you want to join our newsletter, send us an email and we'll add you.
Technology, right?
The nitty gritty of it all, right?
Yeah, for sure. So the story of Rose and domestic violence really hit hard for women in this person who's asking the question's life.
Okay.
Some might be in the same situation. How would you suggest that women come together in community to support each other?
That's a really interesting point. So Rose is a pseudonym that I use for a section in the book where I talk about domestic violence, which is obviously something important to talk about. I chose her because I wanted to kind of counteract maybe a stereotype that might exist about the type of women who seek shelter at the women's shelter in Reykjavik. And she is a very kind of middle-class, white, educated woman. And I know her. And I know her when she was in this abusive relationship, but I didn't know that she was in an abusive relationship. And I wanted to highlight that to say that this, domestic abuse doesn't know race or class or socioeconomic background. It happens all over the place, and it happens to people all of us know, even though we don't know it. And I think the support that is important there is listening and understanding, and not being judgmental to others, and being there for when people decide to take an important step, but also to recognize that there's different forms of abuse. You know, this one was talking about a lot of this was not necessarily physical abuse, but mental abuse, and that is also a form of domestic violence and control and coercion, and that you don't. She had this wonderful line that she said, you know, you don't have to have, you know, your whole life sorted out. You can just take the first step and just give the center a call. And that's all you have to think about now. You don't have to think about, but what if this, and what if that, and how is this going to work, and how is that going to work? Just take that first step to make the phone call. And I think for people who aren't in those situations themselves, maybe, but just to know and understand and provide a non-judgmental background and help and support, because a lot of women end up having to return to their abusers because they can't afford to live elsewhere, or because of the children's situation, all this. And so I think that the more help that we can all provide is also really important.
I think that that's all the time we have for Q&A right now. So I'm going to turn it back over to our co-moderator, Gail, but I just want to say thank you so much for.
No problem. I'm going to put some tags in
conversation.
the thing here for you. So before I go,
Please do.
so this is the Iceland Writers Retreat. This is me, but it's probably not that updated. And Facebook. Best course I took in high school was typing, so I can be fast. I think that's Facebook and Instagram, which I'm most active on. And then X, I guess, is what we call it nowadays, but I'll put that in. I don't use it much. So there you go. So that's a good way to stay in touch.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that, Gail. Back to you.
Okay, well, I thank you both, Wendy and Eliza, for what a great interview. Read the book and enjoyed hearing so much more from you. I want to thank everyone who has joined us today, and a reminder that Together Women Rise depends on donations to fund projects around the world and to provide powerful learning opportunities at events such as today's. Our year-end annual appeal is underway right now, and please visit our website at togetherwomen.rise.org or click on the link in the chat. Our next book club events will be in 2024. January 18th, 2024, we will discuss Nervous Conditions by Titsi Dargaramunga. On April 23rd, 24th, we'll discuss Guardians of the Trees by Canary Webb, who is the founder of RISE, which is a past grantee, Health in Harmony. We encourage folks to join Goodreads to continue the discussion, make book recommendations, etc. And finally, just a quick reminder about our monthly webinars. Join us tomorrow on Thursday, November 2nd, to hear about the projects we are funding with children of Vietnam and growth through learning. Also, learn more about our transformational partnership with Equality Now. Everyone is welcome. Register using the link in the chat. All of our book selections and book club events are posted on the upcoming events page under the Join Us tab on our website.